Small business is about courage, risk-taking, independence, and we small business owners are survivors. Everybody has an idea for a business, but how do you take that idea from mind to market? This is the place to learn.
Small Business School with Hattie Bryant.
It's a new kind of school. Together we'll learn about business from the inside out, from the people who've done it. We'll meet the men and women who are today's pioneers and quiet heroes. Their lives are the textbooks. Our classroom is the world. Hi, I'm Hattie Bryant. Starting and growing a business takes enormous energy, so much so you can burn out. Today you will meet entrepreneurs who poured their lives into the task of creating something out of nothing, but then came to the point that they felt it was time to go in another direction. They sold their baby. And though it can be an excruciatingly painful decision, equally painful is the decision to just shut the doors. And every year, there are hundreds of thousands of business owners who do simply that. Today, you'll meet 3 of our favorite people who will tell you why and how they sold their companies. Since they can all do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and where they want to do it, it didn't take much arm twisting to convince Jim Schell, Lorraine Miller, and Peter Schink to come to our offices in San Diego. They told us why and how they sold their businesses.
It got to the point where I trudged in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't go in on Saturday, and I even started to play golf, and that's a sure sign that you're burned out in business.
You want to begin with business number 1?
The first one was a small sporting goods company called General Sports, clever name. We were wholesale and retail. It was a failing company at the time that I bought it. I bought it we were probably doing a couple $100,000 and 1970, I believe, and sold it in 1981, and we were doing about $2.5 million. 15 employees, your basic socks and jocks kind of a company.
So you were selling to sports teams or schools or to general retail?
Teams, it was retail and wholesale. So the retail part is walk-in. The wholesale part is teams, schools, colleges, whatever.
So why did you decide to sell it?
I had started that business in 1970. I started the second business as an outgrowth of that in 1972. So I was running both of them. By 1981, the second business was probably, $10 million in sales, and I was trying to wear both hats, and I couldn't. So I kind of morphed into selling the first one and stayed with the second one.
Let's talk about how you sold that business. It's at $2.5 million, it's retail, it's wholesale, it's in the sporting goods arena. How did you do it?
Well, because of the second business, I'd been kind of phasing out for a couple years, so customers, employees didn't even notice. And the buyers, the 2 key employees, I gave them the sweetest deal I could because I trusted them and they were friends, and it worked out for both of us. And today they're a very healthy $6 million company, and everybody lived happily ever after. I took 10% down, and I think I gave them like 10 years to pay it off because I knew it was going to work, and they were good people, and they paid it off in 3 years, I think. So, which incidentally is kind of a rule of thumb. If you can't buy a business and pay it off in 3 to 5 years, maybe you're buying the wrong business.
What was the second business?
Since I was in the sporting goods business on the first business, we started a little side business to do the numbering and the lettering on athletic jerseys. And so it kept growing and growing, and where we started, our customers were sporting goods stores. When we ended, our customers were Targets and Walmarts of this world.
So now you're free. You've gotten rid of the first business. Now you're free to focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you say, I'm selling this?
This was 81 when I sold the first business. Went full-time into the second business. By 1990, I'd had it. It was total, unadulterated burnout. There's lots of different reasons for selling businesses. In this case, I had a couple hundred employees, which was way beyond my management Peter principle. And we'd outgrown the balance sheet. We'd outgrown me as a manager, and business was not fun. One day in June of '89, business was problems. The people were lined up at my door, and so I walked out, went to a local park, sat down on a park bench, and made a list of all the management skills that I didn't have. And when I looked at them, things like attention to detail and focus, can you change those? I don't think so. And by the time I got through with the list, and I've still got it at home somewhere, I said, I cannot change. I cannot make the change required. And so I went back and started the process of finding a business broker and selling the business.
How did you know to call a business broker?
From my standpoint, that was the only option. I went to my attorney, who happened to be a good friend of mine, and he's a business attorney, and I asked him what my options are, and he said da-da-da, da-da-da, and business broker, and the business broker made a lot of sense, and still does, and it was the right thing to do.
Okay, let's talk about how you found the one you used, and would someone else watching this use the same techniques, or how does one go about finding a business
Referrals.
broker? Okay.
Attorneys, accountants, bankers, one of those three, they know.
Tell us about the business that you started.
Well, started out as a plant shop in a little boarded up building that I had taken the boards off the windows. And over the last 28 years, turned it into about 17,000 square feet of greenhouse space, specializing in house plants, and then an outside garden center with ponds and beautiful plants.
You started in 1975 and sold in 2002.
Right, 2002.
Why did you sell your business, Lorraine?
Well, I'm old. Well, actually a lot of reasons. I really wanted to just do something else. Life is short. And I love new experiences, and I want to find one for myself. And also, I grew my company up to 65 employees, and I think I surpassed my skills.
Okay.
All I had was a passion for being my own boss and for creating my own path. And I feel like I built that thing, not physically with my hands, which I did, but with my head and my guts. You know, it took a lot of tenacity, it took a lot of perseverance, it took a lot of waiting for one person to leave the counter and another person to come up, because the first person told me, no, you can't. And to do what I needed to do to grow it was a fight. And any fighter wears down.
Okay.
And so in about 1985, it was probably one of those things where ideas are in the air, but of course I thought it was my original idea.
Right, sure.
To provide plant maintenance or a plant watering service to banks and malls and hospitals, whatever, that had plants. And so that would create a steady stream of income for me. So I started with a branch bank where I banked, and ended up with 500 buildings, 25 employees that are just out watering all the time. That gave me a good, steady monthly income, as well as all of the commercial sales that went along with it. So a new hospital goes up, we sell them new plants, we provide the service, and it just is exponentially growing. And
Do you remember when you first got the idea that you could or should or wanted to sell?
well, I felt my passion being replaced with the struggle.
Okay.
I felt my fun kind of fading a little bit. Having realized that I needed some professional help in selling it,
Right.
I found the ideal person. This was a man that I had met when I was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, and he had been president of the board, and he had been president of one of the banks in Utah. And I bumped into him and said, you know, Brad, I've been thinking about selling my business, and I've had a lot of interest in it, and would you help me? And so he took my financials, and first week he called me up and he said, this is a really cool little business. My wife and I might want to buy it.
Oh,
And then he called me back and he said, if you don't mind, I'm going to send your financials up to this fellow. He buys and sells a lot of businesses, and I want to have him look at it and help me put a good evaluation to it.
Okay.
And he said, and also, I have a friend that sold his business about a year ago, and he's looking for a new business to buy. So I've been talking to him too. And so all of a sudden it seemed, ooh, this is fun, you know?
Oh, yeah.
There's all kind of options here. And so he sent my financials out to this fellow named Mark, and Mark called him back the next day and said, I got the financials, so I jumped in my car and drove down and looked at the business, and I want that business.
Started a business in 1980, an advertising and marketing company in a little tiny burg, which at the time we thought was just perfect fodder for a small regional agency. And we sat unknowingly on the verge of the internet and all the computer communications that came. And all of a sudden we found that it didn't matter where you were. And if you could deliver good ideas and good service, your geographic location meant nothing. So what had been intended to be a relatively small regional agency suddenly burgeoned to be something quite different with clients on both coasts.
What year did it hit you, I need to sell this business, or I have to sell this business, or I want to sell this business?
It was kind of a realization, I would say, circa 1993, 94 in there. The company had grown substantially year over year. The revenues were growing, the relationships were growing, the number of clients were growing. And we suddenly came to realize two things. One was that in order to continue to grow, and we had plenty of invitations to do so, there were going to be a lot more airplane trips, a lot more times on opposite coasts and far away, which created both management and personal challenges. The other thing was I had a personal revelation that our son was getting taller and taller and taller. And I'd see him in this window as I was departing, kind of waving goodbye. And his head level kept going up and up and up. And I suddenly realized I was missing the intervals. I was missing the time in between the recognition of those spaces. And I came home from one of these trips and said to my wife, kid's 13 years old. He's gone in 5 years. Do we want a bigger company? Do we want more zeros in the checkbook? Or do we want a family relationship with our son? And she was feeling a lot of the same anxieties I was in terms of just the tenor and the intensity of work. And we kind of looked at each other and said, you know what? They say, buy low, sell high. The company's in this incredible surge. What better time would there be? We have this marvelous asset that's in full momentum going forward. Let's vote for the family, and that's what we did. As you can imagine, given the sensitivity of relationships with clients, you didn't want word circulating that, gosh, guess what? The owners are talking about leaving, the business. And certainly imagine, the kind of upheaval and travails and angst that would create among employees as well. Right. So the information had to be very closely kept until you were absolutely certain, to the degree possible, that you were going to go forward with it. And we ended up with 72 people who proposed to buy the business.
Okay, wait. But how did they even know you were selling if that was a secret?
I ran a blind ad in the Wall Street Journal.
What did it say?
Well, it said very simply that there was a successful regional advertising agency for sale in a highly desirable place. Private inquiries only, serious people only. That's all it said. So we ended up with 72 qualified people who said they were prepared to buy the business.
Wow. So did they send you a letter?
Sent a letter. We asked for a letter and for just, kind of basic background that would make them eligible to do, to buy a business of our sort.
Right. Okay. So what was your first way to cut the 72 down? Where did you go from 72 to, and how did you make this?
We're members of a marvelous trade organization, National Trade Group, American Association of Advertising Agencies, which did a great job of counseling any number of agencies throughout, the previous decades previous to ours. So they had a lot of staff experience in this. And it just happened that their regional guy was visiting our offices at the time I had this stack of 72. And I said, would you do me a favor, take an hour, go in and, take a cup of coffee, go through these letters, and tell me if you see any that you believe are really home runs, people that you know in the industry who you feel have both the means, the inclination, and the chemistry to be a match here. So he did exactly that. Came out after an hour, there were 4 letters left on the desk. He said, any of those 4. Then we brought our CFO into it, and we had an accountant, our CFO, our attorney, and the 2 owners, and that was the 5-person team that did the deal all the way through.
Business valuations, equity, liquidity, and an exit strategy, all keys that unlock the door to sell a business. And you'll notice that not one of these business owners went through the process of selling their business alone. They all reached out for experts to guide them. Bankers, CPAs, attorneys, business brokers, and old friends played a part. When we start our business, most of us are a bit headstrong and independent. Yet the longer we own our business, the more we find that hiring experts saves us time, money, and heartache. When it was time to sell their companies, Peter, Jim, and Lorraine were wise enough to know what they didn't know. They did know that they had created value, and they had happy customers and skilled employees. They knew they had played by the rules, and their financials would withstand the toughest scrutiny. Yet, they were not entirely sure how to value their companies or how to find the right buyer. And so they reached out for experts to guide them. It's not too early to begin thinking about your business valuation, your equity and liquidity models, and your exit strategy, and begin finding experts to help you.
The business community loves our show. One owner says you're motivating, informative, and inspiring. Another calls us insightful. One says it does my soul good. Another thinks we are the true reality show. And we're called the best business educational show on television. Want to learn more? Join the thousands of small business owners who are making a difference and add your voice to our story. Visit us online at smallbusinessschool.org.
Well, for the first few years of business, people told me, oh, you've created such a great place. This is all about you. And, you know, I at first took it as a compliment, but then didn't take me very long to realize that that isn't creating a good business if it's all about me. It has to stand on its own. And as I got more involved in the actual business world, I learned the phrase transferable value. And that if you want to build a business and make it sellable, you have to build a value that you can transfer. It's very simple. And so you have to detach yourself from the viability of the business so that you can step aside.
The primary thing you've got to do is create an environment where it can exist without you. And so in my case, we were a light manufacturing company. The relationships were with salespeople, with the buyers, and so it wasn't an issue. It wasn't a big problem for me to exit the company.
I know that there's all kinds of formulas for evaluating a business, but the way Brad put it to me is the value of a business is what a willing buyer and a willing seller agree on.
Okay.
And
Okay.
we use those formulas for a basis, but there's potential of the business and a lot of other things go into it.
Like goodwill.
Right, and also just if it attracts your attention, if you're a buyer that goes, oh, this is going to be a lot of fun, I could love doing this, that adds value to it.
How did you value it?
Valued it the typical way, which is we sold assets, not stock, and that's what most small businesses do because the buyer doesn't want the baggage that goes with the stock sale. And I valued it, the value of the assets, which is accounts receivable, inventory, and a fair market value on the equipment. And then a goodwill factor, which is basically earnings, take your bottom line on your P&L, and then you add back depreciation and interest, which is commonly known as Ebitda.
Yeah.
And then you recast it, what the business brokers would call recasting, which is also adding back the money that I took out of it, my salary and benefits and what have you. And you come up with a figure that's called recasted earnings, and then you apply a multiple to it.
Let's explain Ebitda. It is an acronym, so
It is.
let's go through that.
Okay, it's an acronym for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so
All right.
when I buy a business and I'm buying a business and I can say that recasted EBITDA figure is the amount of money that I can expect to generate from that business.
So explain goodwill, and does it have a role in every business sale?
Yes, it has a role in every business sale. Sometimes it has a negative role, but let me explain that. When you buy a business, you buy inventory. It's very tangible. There it is. You buy accounts receivable. There they are. This is what you're owed. You buy equipment, fair market value on equipment, very tangible. And then you buy the intangible called goodwill, which is in effect the earning power of the business. Or some people would say it's the customer list. And if you're buying a business and you think you can't buy that relationship, then you shouldn't pay anything for the goodwill.
Okay.
Someone once said that selling a business is like selling a house. What do you do before you sell a house?
You clean it up.
You clean it up. The same thing with your business, and it involves customers and employees and products and marketing and administration and software systems and accounting and everything else. You bring it all up to speed.
In valuing service businesses, you find very quickly that it is far more art than science. It is science to a degree, and that you can always look at the hard numbers, but what you don't get is a sense of the momentum, and you don't know how to value those relationships. They are not hard assets, they're soft assets, and they're breathing, living assets that don't see themselves as assets.
And could change their mind.
Exactly. So here's everything we've put together that, from an accounting standpoint, tells the story. Here's our award structure, our staffing structure. You take a look at us in the context of the whole industry and tell us where we fit. And give us a sense of what ranges you think would be fair ranges for valuation.
Mm-hmm. And so they helped you get the price. Then when you agreed on all that, how did the person pay you? Did you get it all in one big check?
No.
How does that work?
Well, let's talk about what you sell first of all.
Okay.
You're going to sell hard assets.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to sell receivables minus payables, and you're going to sell, blue sky or goodwill or whatever it is you want to say. So, basically, there was a cash down payment, a fairly substantial one on the front end, and then a series of scheduled payments of receivables, and then a performance-based third track that would compensate us based on the client retention, the amount of volume that the new owner would do over a period of years. So those are the three tracks.
The seller sells the future, the buyer buys the past. So you want to try and make a case for the fact that, if we only had such and such here, the business could go somewhere. And so the role there was for me to try and make a case for the fact that the business had all this potential, so that the buyer would say, oh, wow, all I have to do is throw this at the business and it's off and running.
So when should someone have an exit strategy?
Well, everyone should have an exit strategy. I mean, after all, we're all going to exit, right?
Yeah.
Well, what I loved about Cactus and Tropicals was birthing it and growing it. I love that creative part. I love going in every day knowing, I can do something new today. I can create a new part to this. I can add to this. At a certain point, it becomes more maintaining it than creating it. And then the spark burns out for me. And then a new person comes in and picks it up at that level and sees creative opportunities that I had lost sight of because it was such a maintenance job for me.
It happens all the time. Companies outgrow entrepreneurs every day, and I was just another one.
So you're not Peter the ad man?
No, I'm Peter the Renaissance man. I mean, you must understand. People say to me all the time, well, you asked, did I miss having, the calendar or the list of things to do? And yes, by rote and routine, I missed not having a prescribed, diary of things to do on a given day. But in life, it was anything but. I mean, it was recess. It was all of a sudden the doors kicked open, the whole world was out there, there was no particular obligation. You could make a contribution to your community, you could manage your time in any way you chose, you could go any place you wanted to go. Who wouldn't find that absolutely engaging? Come on.
I didn't just grow plants, I helped grow people. And if they want to stay with plants or, make their degree in horticulture more meaningful, then that means a lot to me. But what I really want to see is people know that they can be more than they think they can.
I'm living. I have to believe that given an opportunity, almost everybody that has the same set of circumstances I have would want to say, it's recess, let's go play. Why not?
Jim, Lorraine, and Peter each started a business with nearly nothing, and years later sold for big bucks. Now they are rich in many ways. They deserve to be proud that they created value for customers and employees, and that they tried the nearly impossible and succeeded.
You just met 3 smart, strong, bright, independent entrepreneurs who all sold their businesses. To make those sales successful, they did not try to go through the process alone. They all reached out for experts to guide them. We'll see you next time.
Small Business School with Hattie Bryant.
If you want to learn more about starting, running, and growing a business, come to our website, smallbusinessschool.org. There's streaming video and interactive study guides.
The only way we can compete with big business is to be faster, smarter, and better. We are the engine of the American economy. We create the jobs. Small business is about big commitment. It's about sacrifice and struggle. But we do it because we say, if I don't do this, my life won't be complete.